Sympathy versus empathy. Understanding, more importantly, living the difference between these two words, these two concepts, is the difference between living a good life and a great life. Living a life that's satisfactory versus living a life that's meaningful and inspirational. I'm Baruch Levy, also known as B, co-founder of Soul Centered, a spiritual center for meaning, purpose, and healing for anybody in the afternoon of life. That is the second half of life. And that's why I'm dedicated to this second half of life, because we have a shot at living a life of empathy, not just sympathy. So let's get into it. Let's talk about it because it is that important. I have this conversation almost daily with clients, if not on the literal distinction between the two, certainly the difference of quality of life of living empathy versus living sympathy. So sympathy comes from the two words pathos, which is feeling or also suffering, and sim, which is the prefix for with. So it's with somebody in their feelings and in their suffering. We know this. You know this definition. Even if you couldn't literally parse it, you demonstrate it, and you've seen it demonstrated, and I'm sure you've had it done to you many times. Nothing wrong with it. It's quite a lovely gesture. You go to a funeral or a wake or a shiva. I've officiated at 500 of them, literally 500 plus as a rabbi. And I've seen sympathy over and over. And here's a good way to hear it at a funeral or at that wake. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Smith, for your loss. Let me know if there's anything I can do with you. And Mrs. Smith says thank you. And she never does a damn thing because why? Mrs. Smith, who's in grief, has no clue what she needs. I hear this over and over again from people in grief. I don't know what I need. I'm lost. I'm in the darkness. I'm hanging on by a thread. And all these people basically are saying nothing to me. Sweet nothings, but nothing nonetheless. It's coming from a good place. It's not malice. But in the end, it is literally meaningless. Let me know what I can do with you. 99.9% of the time, that translates to nothing. I just sound like that guy from Hogan's Heroes. Nothing. I see nothing. Versus empathy. What is empathy? Pathos, same roots, feeling or suffering, but the prefix is all the difference in the world. Just a couple letters difference. M versus sim. M means in versus with. In the feeling, in the suffering. I don't just see your suffering, right? And kind of witness it from afar and offer you sort of empty gestures. I'm in it with you. Best summed up by Brene Brown. Great video. You can just Google it afterwards. Sympathy, Empathy. Brene talks about coming to out in the woods, hiking here in Colorado. You come to a hole in the ground and you look down and you see someone stuck in the hole and they're struggling, they're suffering. And sympathy, you stand at the top, you look down and say, oh my God, I'm so sorry for your suffering. Is there anything I can do for you? Here's a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. See you later. Person doesn't know what they need. They're lost. If they knew, they'd be out of the hole. Empathy is coming to that same hole, looking down and saying, oh my God, you're in the suffering? Hang on. And either jumping down in it. I don't really love that so much. How about building a little rope thing and going down, and I'm in it with you, and we're going to find our way out together. That is not such a subtle shift. That's a profound shift. You know, when you've lost a loved one, I call them funeral friends. Who are your funeral friends? They don't just show up and say, let me know what I can do for you. They show up and say, we've coordinated, me and your other friends have coordinated a list of food. This will be delivered on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday by such and such. And remind me, do you have any dietary constrictions or restrictions? And I just cleaned your house for you while you were at the funeral. We sent over the cleaners and I'll be picking up the kids on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, or I'll drive you to your chemo treatments. Not let me know what I can do, but it's done. It's taken care of. Now, it's not only just the doing, right? It's not about the just giving by commission, by doing. It's also sometimes by giving by omission, leaving out. So here's an example. You go to a wake or a shiva home, and sometimes it's almost got a festive atmosphere, not because it's a happy occasion, but because people don't know how to hold the silence. First thing I would do when I'd officiate at funerals when I was a officiating rabbi is I would go to the mic and I would say, instead of shh, because it'd be noisy. I'd say, family appreciates you being here, and thank you for giving them the space, the silence, the space, and holding that space for them to feel whatever they're feeling. And in that moment, boom, shift of energy. And now the audience, the family, the friends, the community had a job. And it's a job to hold that space in silence, because everything in us wants to rush and fill in the void, fill in the silence with anything, noise, commotion, something, distraction. But what that family needs, what that funeral can provide them an opportunity for, is space to feel their feelings. When you create that space, that container for a friend, for a loved one, you are giving them such a gift. Sometimes it's just a giving through holding back. Kabbalah calls it simsum, holding back what you want to give to provide for what they need. This can be reflected at a shiva or a wake. One of the laws of Jewish visiting a mourner, Ariel and I talk about some of these best practices in Carry the Fire, a program we created for anybody, best practice through grieving. It's a grief retreat. And one of them is to mirror the person whom you're comforting. If they want to talk about baseball at a shiva, at a wake, visiting them at their home, and they just lost a loved one, then you talk about baseball. You don't know what baseball is, you just listen and mirror them and follow them along. Or they want to talk about the weather or something trivial. They want to talk about their loved one. You, even if you're uncomfortable with it, you dive in and you talk about it. And if they want to talk about nothing, then you talk about nothing. In fact, the law is you don't even speak to them until spoken to. You just sit with them. We think in the West that sitting and not speaking is doing nothing, when sitting and mirroring their sitting and mirroring their silence is an act of love, holding back what you want, because it's not about you. It's not about what you want to do or your comfort or discomfort. It's about them, seeing them, witnessing them, and saying, without saying it verbally, I see you. So we're going to sit here and be where you need to be. That is empathy. And it's not nothing. It's something. It's everything. It's holding the space for another person is the greatest gift we can ever give them. It's also tied to the word patience, coming from pathos, same root. Patience is holding the suffering. In Hebrew, savlanut, literally holding the suffering. Saval is suffering. So savlanut or patience are both connected to suffering. What is patience? Holding the suffering. I mean, isn't that remarkable? Think about, what is patience? When we teach a toddler or a teenager or ourselves, I have 3 teenagers right now, teaching them patience, urgency, a want versus a need. Hold the suffering is the greatest gift you can do as a parent. To teach a child how to hold their suffering and not move to get rid of it. We just experienced this on a family trip. One of my teenagers was bored. And I said, that's great. She said, what do you mean that's great? I said, it's so great to be bored, because then you got to learn how to hold the boredom, the nothingness, the suffering. She looked at me like I was nuts. But that's a gift you can give to somebody, is to teach them how to suffer, to make their sufferings meaningful and matter. Viktor Frankl, my teacher, founder of logotherapy, the central thesis of logotherapy, one of them, is to be able to hold your suffering for long enough to allow it to reveal the meaning, because it's in there. There is meaning in the darkness. There is meaning in the void. There is meaning in the suffering. But so often we are in such a rush to find the answers, to find resolution, to fix the problem for ourselves and for others. And so when we can hold back, have the patience, hold the suffering to create that space for another to feel their feelings and to be in it with them, we have just given them a divine act and the greatest thing that we can ever contribute to another human being. I'll end with this beautiful teaching in Kabbalah of a man who's lost in the woods, and he's tried this way and that way, and he's spinning, and he doesn't know which way to go, and he finally sees an old lady, wise looking old lady, and she's walking slowly, and he runs up and says, "Ma'am, thank you, I'm so glad, I'm lost. Can you tell me which way to go?" And she says, "I don't know. I can only tell you don't go that way. I just came from that way." And they take each other's hands and they walk in a new direction together. She didn't have the answers. She doesn't know the way, but she has enough humility and ability to be able to hold the space, the suffering for him, not to fix it and say, this is the way, but son, I am in it. I am here. I am with you, and we will find our way out together. The difference between sympathy and empathy showing up in other people's lives to bear witness to them. I'm going to do a whole talk on bearing witness, to be present for them, to hold the space and simply not be with them, but be in the suffering together. Until the next time, I'm Baruch Halevi B. You can learn more about me, Ariella, and Soul Centered at mysoulcentered.org. Until the next time, Shalom, Salam, Namaste. Peace.